it's 7 o'clock. I said I'd be here, and I am. There's 2 people watching, that's good. That's a good number because this is a very work in progress show. They've all been work in progress, but this is so work in progress, I've actually felt the need to describe it as work in progress. But basically, I was asked a while ago to come up with a theme for a recital, and I just sort of said, oh, Paris and the piano, without sort of really thinking through what that might entail, and the promoter said, yeah, that's great, that's brilliant, let's do that. So then the concert ended up getting cancelled anyway, so I never had to really think about it. That's because of the lockdown and everything. But I still think actually that could be a good idea. So I want to try and find out whether it is or not, and if it is, then how it is. So it's a bit like the scene in Adaptation, if anyone's seen it, where the author's trying to find a way into his work, and he has to keep going backwards and backwards until he ends up at the point where the meteor is wiping out the dinosaurs. So in order to get into Paris and the piano, I've been going back to a time before the piano was invented, to a composer who wasn't Italian, who wasn't French, he was Italian, and who didn't really write much music for keyboard that we know about. And that is Jean-Baptiste Lully, or Giovanni Battista Lully, as he was christened when he was born in Italy, before he emigrated to France and became court composer for Louis XIV, and then took French nationality. So the other thing to say, by the way, is this is very much what's the word? Something I want everyone to be involved in with the comments and everything, for feedback and ideas. I want to know which things are interesting, which things aren't interesting, what things there should be more of. So anyway, we're going back in time to the late 17th century, to Pont Neuf. Where all the street musicians, poets and singers would gather. One particular chap called Guillaume de Limoges, who was known as the Lame Lothario. So he was known for his bawdy songs. So yeah, you could hear all manner of entertainment there, but particularly if you happened to be there on a certain time, you'd hear the latest melody from Lully, who wrote mainly tragic operas and ballet, but a lot of his music was transcribed by the keyboard players of the time. So there's a volume by Danglebert who transcribed, collected about 50 transcriptions of Lully's music. So if I set the scene by playing one of those, Dieu des Enfers. So Lully had one of the most amusing composer deaths. Some people saying good evening there, no bonsoir. One of the most amusing composer deaths, and he had some quite stiff competition. But he used to conduct by using a huge rod like this, and rather than the baton that we're sort of accustomed to these days. And he accidentally impaled his foot on it during a performance, and he developed gangrene. But because of his love of dancing, he refused the medical advice to have his leg amputated because he said he wouldn't be able to dance. He had quite a bon vivant lifestyle. He actually fell into disgrace with the king after a while because he had so many illicit affairs. So yes, he refused to do the operation, and of course eventually the infection spread to his brain and he died. But the tradition of tragic French opera would be continued by Jean-Philippe Rameau, who arrived in Paris from Dijon in 1723. Here's a picture of Rameau, but before that I forgot to show a picture of Lully. That was Lully. And there's Mr. Rameau. So Rameau did write a lot of keyboard music. Although he kind of wrote in the same genre as Lully, his style was very different. It was described as manly, harmonious, and of a new character. And consequently, Paris music scene became divided and about which composer they thought was the best. So you were either a Lullyiste or a Rameauner, and that's apparently true. So he wrote a lot of very, very inventive keyboard music. I haven't learned any of it for today, but I'll just play the beginning of his Gavotte from the Gavotten Variations, which I very much advise you to look up in the meantime before the full recital comes available. But here's the theme. So he was, by all accounts, a very miserly man, according to his detractors, a frugal man, according to his friends, largely maybe because he only achieved success very late in life, and when he died it was found that he only had one very old, battered up harpsichord in his lodgings. So that's Rameau. I've got a big heading saying Couperin next, which I've written nothing about, but it's such an important figure. He slightly predates Rameau actually, but I can't figure out exactly how to fit him into the flow of the story yet, but certainly be something about him. So then, skipping to 1763, talk a little bit about the role of the aristocracy in Paris, really. So Mozart was taken on a tour, the young genius was taken on a tour of European capitals by his father to show off his amazing, prodigious skills to the various important families of Europe. So they arrived in Paris in 1763. Mozart was 10, so he was presented to the courts and things. It's an image of Versailles here with a musical happening to sort of illustrate the sort of scene that this might have resulted in. And also a picture of Mozart and his dad. And indeed his sister. So, yeah, very young, talented boy. And some of his first published works actually date from around the Paris trip or were inspired by directly. So there is this piece which is titled Sonata for Keyboard with Optional Violin Part, and I think we can all agree that it's always better not to have violin involved. So let's play a couple of little bars of this. I might do the whole piece in the real thing. So anybody who's ever taken an associated board exam will recognise that as the sort of archetypal Rococo music featuring sort of Alberti bass. Very simple. Melody based on arpeggios. So that was written either in Paris or just after Mozart left, and it was dedicated to Princess Victoire, who Mozart met during his stay there. So there was a obviously the trip had some creative effect on him. So he did actually return to Paris later in life in 1778, possibly sort of because of happy memories of this first visit, but quickly became disillusioned with it. So then we've got 1789 to 99, period of revolution, early 19th century, the Napoleonic rule, and then the restoration around 1815. Not a huge amount of music. It's a bit buzzy apparently. I'm getting a comment. That's unusual. It's fine in the sound check. Yeah, I'll turn that down a bit more. Let's see what the I know what's causing it, probably. Sorry about this. Technical problems in lockdown, trying to be your own sound engineer, but hopefully that'll get better. We'll find out. Anyway, yeah, not been able to find out too much important about music goings on in that period anyway. So yeah, if anybody can comment whether that's improved things or not, that would be great. Could be an excuse for some comment looks. Just maybe people saying good evening. Worse when you picked up the tablet. Is it still doing it? Let me unplug all of these leads. Try it out for a bit, and I think I might have had lots of iPads and stuff running off the same power supply as the computer that's streaming it. Somebody's commented yes. Does that mean yes, it is better? I don't know. We'll find out. Anyway, so after that period, there was a lot of instability over the whole of Europe. So many artists flocked to Paris. One such man was Frédéric Chopin, who arrived in 1831 at the age of 21. He was never intending to necessarily settle in Paris, but everywhere he tried to head for seemed to become engulfed in revolution, so he eventually found solace in Paris and things were a bit calmer. He immediately fitted into the artistic life there, was proclaimed as a genius and was able to make a living teaching aristocracy and giving concerts in the salons. So I'll hear a piece by him. Hum's gone apparently, so I think that might have been it. Thank you for everybody who was helping with the remote sound engineering. So an Etude, Opus 10 number 3 by Frédéric Chopin. Chopin's Etude, Opus 10, number 3. Good morning. Good moaning. I guess it's a hello reference. From Chopin, I thought I'd link to Liszt very obviously, because Liszt also lived in Paris, very similar time. He had to leave briefly for Switzerland after embarking on an affair with the married Countess d'Agoult, which is frowned upon, so he had to do a bit of exile. And as he, when he went to Switzerland, his reputation as the numero uno virtuoso of the day was up for grabs. So a Swiss chap actually called Thalberg moved to Paris with the objective of claiming the #1 spot. So Chopin and Liszt had been friends. Chopin wrote that he would like to rob Liszt of the way he played his etudes, although they had a very on-off relationship. Later, Chopin publicly criticised Liszt for improvising all over his nocturnes. So Liszt was very well known for his virtuosic skills. He was in some ways the first rock star. He's credited with inventing the piano recital. Before him, it was very rare to go and see a concert of just piano music. And Paris became a bit of a mecca for virtuoso solo pianists. So there was this rivalry between Liszt and Thalberg that was sort of brewing and brewing until it was decided the only way to settle it was to hold a piano off between the two of them, which most records say Liszt came out favourably in. So I wasn't sure what list to include. I thought maybe playing a piece from that piano off, but they're all the shortest one's 10 minutes. So there's this study by Liszt called Un Sospiro, which pays tribute to Thalberg in a way. Thalberg had been credited with inventing this technique called the ghost hand, where your thumb of the left and thumb of the right would alternate playing the melody notes in the middle of the piano, whilst the other hands were off doing all sorts of other arpeggios. So we're going to play Un Sospiro. So listen out for that section near the end. It means a sigh. see Jim and Old Coxonbury commented three hands at the right moment there, so he spotted it. So yes, this is roughly where I ran out of time. So I want to talk about Satie, Debussy and Ravel. I'm not quite sure how to link them all yet. Again, please chip in with comments and things. So did I mention the? No, I didn't. I think I forgot actually in the when I was talking about the revolution and the early 19th century post-revolution era. Because the aristocrats were completely relied upon for employing musicians, once they'd all been kind of beheaded, there was nobody around to pay the wages, so they didn't really think that through. So one of the results of that was the setting up of the Paris Conservatoire, which then provided teaching posts for a lot of these out-of-work musicians. And pretty much every French composer from this point went through the conservatoire system, not always with the best results, or I think the three we're going to talk about certainly. So Erik Satie covered in great detail in a whole other recital, so I don't want to say too much about him today. He did go to the Paris Conservatoire. He was called the laziest student in the conservatoire in one of his reports. So I think it's fair to say that the formal education didn't suit him too well. So I'm going to talk more about his time in Montmartre, where he took a job to earn money as a cabaret pianist in the Chat Noir. So rather than play maybe his famous Nociens or Gymnopédies, thought maybe use this to illustrate the kind of the thriving cafe society scene of Paris in the late 19th century. So here's a piece called Je te veux that Satie wrote in that time. I think it conjures up that sort of absinthe-soaked, smoky coffee bar, the atmosphere that I want to suggest anyway. Satie's Je te veux there, illustrating the cafe society, cabaret, nightlife. So yes, I was going to do a little bit on Debussy and Ravel today. So Satie and Debussy met in 1890 and shared a lot in common, actually. They both had a lot of similar ideas about sort of experimental composition, and particularly this kind of minimal structures. There was a bit of a reaction against Wagnerism in France, both here and that continued all the way through past the First World War, when Wagner was sort of seen as symbolic of kind of Germany. Wagner wrote these huge, expansive pieces, some of which lasted 18 hours for orchestral forces, the like of which hadn't been seen before. You know, he had to invent his own instrument called the Wagner tuba just to make the orchestra even bigger. So I think Debussy, it was after a performance of Tristan, said that Wagner's music is a beautiful sunset mistaken for a dawn, which I think is a very eloquent quote and a good way of sort of summing up his feelings towards him. And so Debussy had also studied at the Paris Conservatoire. He equally not got on with the establishment. He was taught by César Franck, and one story goes that Franck kept saying modulé, modulé, change key, change key. And Debussy would say, why should I? I'm perfectly happy where I am. Also, he was credited with saying the only rule I follow is my ear, which is a great quote. So I think in the full version of this recital, I'll play the Image, a set of 3 pieces by Debussy, because I think they're more indicative of his style. It's described as impressionistic, although he hated that term. But there are similarities between, and with Ravel, so the same thing happened to him really, the sort of depictions of water and light. And also the second movement of Image, book 1, is called Hommage à Rameau, which would tie back to the Rameau at the beginning nicely. I'm thinking, not many comments sort of making suggestions, but yeah. Very grateful for the claps and things like that. So yes, I aim to do Image in the real thing. Definitely not Clair de Lune, but because I was going to play that in the Soupy Twist podcast last week and I didn't get around to it, I'm going to attempt that now. So the movement from Suite Bergamasque is probably his best known piece. I realised I've never actually performed it before, so give it a go. Listen, yes, Only Fools and Horses quoting going on. So, yeah, I think aiming to get up to Ravel, kind of First World War era maybe. I'm not sure how to present this recital. Ultimately, might break it into 2 or 3, because it'd be nice to sort of talk about Stravinsky and Boulez and Messiaen, and a lot of what happened between the First World War and the present day, particularly the Hot Club actually. I was originally intending to end this concert with a piece of Jacques Lussier, who was a jazz musician who played at the Hot Club, and he would do kind of jazz transcriptions of a lot of classical music. Unfortunately, he didn't do any of the pieces in... Oh, actually did do some Chopin, but I don't think he did that piece. So I was thinking one way of tying the recital up might be to end with some jazz in the style of Jacques Lussier. I could maybe rework one of these pieces in the style of him. That could be nice. But yeah, just going to talk about Ravel briefly and play one more piece and then disappear. So Debussy met Ravel, would have met him at a club called a sort of society called Les Apaches, meaning the hooligans, which is a group of poets and artists and composers and writers who got together to share ideas and talk about what they thought the future of art should be. Ravel equally did not get on with the establishment at the Paris Conservatoire. He had the honour of being expelled twice. The first time after his teacher deemed him that he was only prepared to learn on his own terms. Again, he was sort of labelled with that impressionist brush. Again, not sure what to play in the final thing. I really want to play Jadot today, which is kind of, you can see why the impressionist tag was sort of stuck to it. It was sort of, it's all about water. It's preceded by a quote saying the river god laughing as the water tickles him. But it's got a sort of impressionistic, sort of slightly washy. I'm not sure what I'm trying to say. But he wrote a piece called La Tombeau de Couperin, which is a memorial of Couperin. So I think again, it might, if I'm going to include some Couperin earlier on in the concert, it'd be nice to maybe play the Menuet from that, because it's an amazing piece. But for today, I'm going to play Jadot and then going to watch this back and see what sort of ideas seem like they might work and what definitely doesn't. And then I might do another one of these in a month's time to sort of see how it's all shaping up, maybe cover some of the other areas in a bit more detail. So this is Jadot. So that's the concluding piece from today. So I'd love to chat to people about the concept and see what they think and see what other ideas people might have and think, what works and what doesn't, as I say. And as ever, there is a link at the bottom of the screen if anybody wants to contribute anything. And it's only work in progress, so please don't feel you have to. Other ways you can be very helpful is by subscribing to the YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Alex Metcalfe, Alex Metcalfe with an E, or generally just liking and sharing stuff. So yeah, thanks for bearing with me whilst I sort of try and fathom out what this is all about. But it's been very helpful to know that some people have watched, and so it feels like actually trying to communicate something to an audience. So it's been very helpful indeed for me. So I'll let you know the next thing I'm going to do another jazz one next, I think. But for now, maybe if you will go and listen to some Jacques Lussier, that would be a very good thing to do. And enjoy the evening. Bye.